You've just alluded to your very real concerns about the risks of civil war, the risks to Afghanistan, and indeed the risks to Pakistan. I want to come back to your very real concerns about the risks to Pakistan's national security in a moment. But bear with me, you have criticised the US pullout. Let me start that again. You have criticised the US pullout from Afghanistan, describing America as having messed it up in Afghanistan. Is that something that you have told the US President personally? Have the two of you spoken since the collapse of the country?
I have spoken to, then he was Senator Joe Biden, way back in 2008. After 2006, we in Pakistan began to realize that this is now going to become a quagmire for the US. I went over to the US, I met Senator John Biden, Senator John Kerry, and Senator Harry Reid. I also addressed various think tanks in the US. And I tried to explain to them there is a history of Afghanistan. What the US is trying to achieve militarily, this is not going to happen. And so they will be stuck there. Our army chief, in 2010, he went over to the US. He tried to tell President Obama that you are not going to have a military victory. The Afghan army is not going to be able to, the moment you go, it will wilt. So we were warning them beforehand. And when the US should have started from a position of strength to do a political settlement with the Taliban when there were 150,000 US troops there.
Let me stop you there. You haven't spoken to the President of the United States since the collapse of the country to the Taliban, correct?
No, I haven't.
He hasn't called you since coming into office, correct?
He's a busy man.
Pakistan is a major non-NATO ally, and yet no call between you and the US President. Do you see this as punishment for supporting the Taliban while they were killing US troops?
Well, you have to ask him why he's too busy to call. But let me just say one thing. I heard this, the Senate hearing going on, which Secretary Blinken was asked all these questions. I want to say this, and I hope that the American politicians would listen to this. You know, Pakistan is the country. Just because we sided with the US, we became an ally of the US after 9/11 in the war in Afghanistan. The suffering this country went through. At one point, there were 50 militant groups attacking our government. In the 80s, Pakistan joined the US against the Soviets. We trained the Mujahideen to do jihad in Afghanistan. Amongst them was Al-Qaeda, Taliban were part of the Mujahideen groups. We trained them that foreign occupation, fighting against them, is a sacred duty. It's jihad, it's a holy war. Fast forward to 9/11, US needs us in Afghanistan. They asked us to join us. A lot of people said that we were abandoned in 1989. The US, after the war was over, left, sanctioned Pakistan. So come 2001, George Bush asked Pakistan to help. And he famously said, we will not abandon Pakistan again. Pakistan joined the US war in Afghanistan. Was I the Prime Minister? I would never have done that. Firstly, the same Mujahideen, now we are telling them because US has invaded Afghanistan, now it's terrorism. They turn against us. Then all the tribal belt of Pashtuns on our side of the border, the Pashtun nationalism kicked in. So they had all sympathies with the Taliban, not because of religious ideology, because of Pashtun ethnicity. So you must understand what happened. No, I really want people to know. They turned against the Pakistan army as collaborators. So the jihadis turned against us, the Pashtuns turned against us, and the more we tried the military operations in civilian areas, the more collateral damage, the more. So we had 50 militant groups attacking us. And on top of it, they must also know, there were 480 drone attacks by the US in Pakistan. only time a country has been attacked by its ally. So we almost went under. Had it not been for our army, a disciplined army and best intelligence agencies, you know, we lost 80,000 people. 80,000 Pakistanis died in it. And on top of it, rather than one word of appreciation, I saw them blaming us.
Well, the fact
They said there were safe havens in Pakistan.
The fact is, Washington, it seems, just can't trust Pakistan. There are calls by lawmakers to reassess the relationship with Islamabad now, to reassess its status as a major non-NATO ally. This was the exchange during the US Secretary of State's congressional testimony on Afghanistan on Monday. Republican Keating, we used to hear we had a complicated relationship with Pakistan. I would say it is duplicitous. Anthony Blinken agreed with the assessment of the role that Pakistan has played over the past 20 years. This is the top diplomat, the US Secretary of State, and he went on to say this, Prime Minister, it's been a role that has involved hedging its bets constantly about the future of Afghanistan. It's one that involved harbouring members of the Taliban, including the Haqqanis. Is that true? And what's your response?
They are ignorant. I was listening to them. I have never heard such ignorance. They are absolutely clueless, number one, about what happened in Afghanistan. They were all in a state of shock. We knew, as I said, in 2008, when I met Senator Joe Biden and John Kerry, then I told them that they were not winning. Hold on, hold on. This is, Becky, it's very important. When our army chief went in 2010, he again explained to President Obama that you're not winning this war. And he said, and this is the important thing. He said, you are going to leave Afghanistan. We will be left with the mess you leave behind. What you are expecting us to do, we cannot do. What they were expecting, what they expecting at the Afghan government? The Afghan government wanted Pakistan to win the war in Afghanistan for them. Pakistan, the state of Pakistan was under attack for being ally of the US.
Afghanistan, you said, had broken the, quote, shackles of slavery when the Taliban took back power. That doesn't sound like the statement of someone who shares the concerns of so many in the world about the future of Afghanistan and its people under the Taliban, notorious for its misogyny, its violence against women, that shows no evidence or interest in guaranteeing basic human rights, particularly those for women. But let's just talk about its makeup.
So it has to be put in its context. What was the context? I spoke. We were, for the first time in history, in 74 history of Pakistan, we had what we called was trying to get rid of the colonial system of education. So colonial system of education was a tiny elite had this colonial English medium education and the masses had another Urdu medium education. And this created two classes. And so for the first time we had a unified curriculum in our history. And what I was trying to say was that mental slavery, which comes from the colonial form of education, is much worse than physical slavery. And one line I gave example of, in Afghanistan they have got freedom. Now, I never quite understood what was the issue behind it, because when the British left, it was freedom for Afghanistan. When the Soviets left, it was freedom. So when the US leave, what am I supposed to say?
Seeks legitimacy. It will need to show evidence that it shares the values of those that it is seeking legitimacy for, and that being the West, for example. I grew up watching you as a star of Pakistan's cricket team. The Taliban have said that women shouldn't play cricket. In fact, they've said women shouldn't be involved in sport at all. This is the sort of Taliban that we are seeing today. Do you support that? I mean, women have been protesting about more inclusivity, about their rights. We know women first-hand experience, women are too frightened to come out of their homes, they're too frightened to go to the workplace if they're allowed at all, they've been flogged. I mean, do you support their cause?
Look, Becky, first of all, let us just compare what happened after the Soviets left in 1989 and compare to what the situation is right now when the US has departed from Afghanistan. When the Soviets left in 1989, the sort of bloodbath that took place, over 200,000 Afghans died in that bloodbath. Now compare that to what has happened now. Frankly, I mean, we were all relieved. We expected a bloodbath. When Ashraf Ghani said that he left Afghanistan because he was scared of a bloodbath in Kabul, well, it could have happened. We were worried that when the US departed, there would be complete chaos in Afghanistan, civil war. Our intelligence agencies told us that Taliban would not be able to take over all of Afghanistan. And if they tried to take over Afghanistan militarily, there would be a protracted civil war, which is what we were scared of, because we are the ones who would suffer the most. So therefore now, in that, bearing in mind what could have happened and what has happened, I feel give them time. I feel very strongly that it's a mistake to think that someone from outside will give Afghan women rights. Afghan women are strong. Give them time. They will get their rights.